On a snowy Christmas night outside Sterling Tower, everyone assumed the graveyard shift would pass in quiet boredom. Then the glass doors slid open, and Vivian Sterling, the icy, untouchable CEO in a bright red V-neck dress, stopped directly in front of Flynn Merrick, the exhausted single-dad gatekeeper working overtime to afford his daughter's only present. In full view of stunned executives, security cameras, and whispered gossip, she stepped closer, her eyes burning with a dangerous secret, and said clearly, "Marry me." Flynn froze, sensing her impossible proposal might save her empire, expose a crime, and shatter his fragile world forever tonight. What could make a powerful CEO propose to a gatekeeper she barely knew, and why tonight? Of all nights, the truth would break hearts before it healed them. Sterling Tower rose against the December sky like a monument to ambition. Glass and steel stretched toward the stars, its warm golden lights cutting through the swirling snow. Inside, the annual Christmas charity gala was reaching its peak, with politicians, investors, and socialites gathering on the upper floors to celebrate generosity they had never truly felt. Below, in a small security booth near the main entrance, the world moved at a different pace entirely. Vivian Sterling had built her reputation on precision. At 34, she had already survived 3 hostile takeover attempts, a public betrayal by a man she had once loved, and the constant whispers that she was too young, too emotional, too female to run a billion-dollar empire. Her father, Wilfred Sterling, had founded the company with sweat and cunning, but he had never quite believed his daughter could protect what he had built. So Vivian had learned to wear coldness like armor, to speak in numbers and contracts rather than feelings. Tonight, in her private office on the 42nd floor, she stared at a document that threatened to destroy everything. The internal audit report had arrived 3 hours earlier, delivered by a nervous accountant who had refused to send it through official channels. The numbers told a story of systematic theft. Millions of dollars siphoned from the Sterling Christmas Charity Fund through a maze of shell companies that led back to one name, Clinton Waverly. Clinton was her father's most trusted advisor, the man Wilfred called family. He had been with the company for 23 years, longer than Vivian had been alive. He organized the charity galas, posed for photographs with orphans, gave speeches about giving back to the community, and for the past 2 years, he had been stealing from the children he claimed to champion. An anonymous email had arrived with the audit report. The words still burned in Vivian's mind. "If you sign any documents tonight, you become legally complicit. They are planning to frame you before the federal investigation begins in January. Trust no one inside the system. Find someone outside." She had tried to warn her father. Wilfred had dismissed her with a wave of his hand and a patronizing smile. "Clinton has been with us since before you learned to walk," he had said. "Don't embarrass yourself by chasing shadows on Christmas Eve." So Vivian stood alone, dressed in a scarlet gown that felt less like celebration and more like battle armor. The gala guests expected a speech from her in less than an hour. Clinton expected her signature on documents that would seal her fate. And somewhere in this tower, she needed to find someone outside the corrupted system, someone who could help her expose the truth before it buried her alive. 6 floors below the executive offices, in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of the city, Flynn Merrick was trying to fix a broken doll. The plastic arm had snapped off 3 days ago when Audrey, his 7-year-old daughter, had dropped it while running to show him something in her favorite cartoon. He had promised to repair it before Christmas, and Flynn Merrick always kept his promises, even when keeping them meant working with wire and tape instead of proper tools. The apartment was small but clean. decorated with a plastic Christmas tree that cost $12 and a string of lights he had rescued from a neighbor's trash. Audrey sat on the worn couch, her blonde curls still damp from her bath, watching a holiday special with the volume turned low. She kept glancing at her father's hands, waiting to see if magic would happen. Flynn had once built things that mattered. There was a photograph on the wall, faded now, showing him in his Air Force uniform, standing beside radar equipment that tracked missiles across continents. He had been a security systems specialist, trained in encryption protocols and threat assessment, trusted with secrets that could start or end wars. That life felt like a dream now, something that had happened to a different person. His wife, Sarah, had gotten sick 4 years ago. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, ordinary and devastating. Stage 4, inoperable. Every specialist said the same thing with different words. Flynn had requested early discharge from the military, sold everything they owned, moved them to a smaller city where the hospitals offered experimental treatments and the apartments cost less. None of it had been enough. Sarah died on a spring morning with Audrey's hand in hers. Flynn had not slept for 3 days before, and he did not sleep for 3 days after. The only thing that kept him standing was the small girl who still needed breakfast, who still needed bedtime stories, who still believed that her father could fix anything, even things that could never be repaired. The gatekeeper job at Sterling Tower had been a compromise. The hours allowed him to drop Audrey at school and pick her up. The pay covered rent and groceries with a little left over for small emergencies. It was not the life he had imagined, but it was a life. And Flynn had learned to be grateful for that. "Daddy," Audrey's voice pulled him back to the present. "Is it almost fixed?" Flynn held up the doll, its arm now attached with careful precision that would not be visible beneath its sleeve. "Good as new, princess." Audrey squealed and jumped from the couch, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You're the best fixer in the whole world." He hugged her back, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence. "Almost bedtime. Mrs. Patterson will be here in a few minutes to stay with you while I work." "It's Christmas Eve," Audrey said, her voice small. "Everyone else gets to be with their families tonight." Flynn felt the familiar ache in his chest. "I know, baby. But if I work tonight, we'll have enough for your piano lessons next month, and I promise I'll be home for breakfast. We'll open presents together." Audrey considered this, then nodded solemnly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a plastic bracelet, the kind that came in party favor bags. It was pink with tiny stars. "This is my lucky bracelet. I want you to wear it tonight so the Christmas angels will protect you." Flynn slipped it onto his wrist. "I'll wear it the whole time. Now get your pajamas on. Mrs. Patterson makes the best hot chocolate." 20 minutes later, Flynn walked through the snow toward Sterling Tower, the plastic bracelet hidden beneath his uniform sleeve. The night shift on Christmas Eve was supposed to be boring. A skeleton crew, minimal activity, nothing to do but watch empty hallways on security monitors and count the hours until dawn. The first time Flynn saw Vivian Sterling up close was in the parking garage. She had been distracted, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The garage floor was slick with melted ice, and her luxury sedan had begun to slide just as she entered. Skidding sideways toward a concrete pillar, Flynn had been on his patrol round, checking cameras and locks as he did every 90 minutes. He saw the headlights spin, heard the screech of brakes, and ran toward the vehicle before his mind fully processed what was happening. Through the window, he could see her face, pale with sudden fear, hands frozen on the wheel. He knocked on the glass, keeping his voice calm. "Turn off the engine. Pull the parking brake. Now ease off the steering." She followed his instructions, her movements jerky but precise. The car stopped 3 feet from the pillar, close enough that the collision would have been serious. For a moment, they simply looked at each other through the window, her eyes wide, his steady. Flynn stepped back and opened her door. "The floor's been slick all evening. I'll have someone put down more salt. Are you all right?" Vivian stepped out, her heels clicking against the concrete. She was taller than he expected, her posture rigid with the kind of controlled tension that spoke of pressure held too long. "I'm fine, thank you." There was no warmth in her voice, no real gratitude. Flynn had seen that before in executives, the way they acknowledged service without seeing the person providing it. He nodded once and turned to continue his patrol. Then a small voice echoed across the garage. "Daddy." Flynn turned to see Audrey running toward him, her pink backpack bouncing, Mrs. Patterson hurrying behind with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Merrick. She insisted on giving you something before I took her to my apartment." Audrey skidded to a stop, nearly colliding with Flynn's legs, in her arms. She clutched a thermos and a folded piece of paper. "I made you hot chocolate, and I drew a picture of us by the Christmas tree so you won't be lonely." Flynn knelt down, accepting the gifts with a smile that transformed his tired face. "These are perfect. Thank you, sweetheart." Then Audrey noticed the woman standing nearby, and her eyes went wide. Vivian was shivering slightly, her designer coat clearly insufficient for the bitter cold. Without hesitation, Audrey unwound the small knitted scarf from her own neck and walked directly to the CEO of Sterling Industries. "You look cold," Audrey said, holding out the scarf. "This will help." Vivian stared at the child as if she had never encountered one before. The scarf was pink and purple, clearly handmade, slightly uneven in its stitching. It was worth nothing and everything. Slowly, Vivian knelt down to Audrey's level, her expression shifting into something almost vulnerable. "That's very kind of you," she said quietly. "Won't you be cold?" "Mrs. Patterson's apartment is really warm," Audrey assured her. "And you need it more. My daddy says we should always help people who need help." Vivian accepted the scarf. Her fingers, Flynn noticed, were trembling, and not from the cold. She looked at the child, then at Flynn, and something complicated passed through her eyes. "Thank you," she said, and this time she meant it. Mrs. Patterson collected Audrey, and they disappeared into the elevator. Flynn watched Vivian tuck the small scarf into her coat pocket, her fingers lingering on the yarn. When she looked at him again, her armor had slipped slightly. "Your daughter is remarkable," she said. "She's the best thing I've ever done." Vivian nodded once, then walked toward the executive elevator without another word. But Flynn had seen something in her face that he recognized the weight of problems too heavy to share. The loneliness of fighting battles alone. He had worn that expression himself, in the months after Sarah's diagnosis, before he learned that survival sometimes meant accepting help from unexpected places. The charity gala filled the 40th floor with noise and light. Crystal chandeliers threw rainbow patterns across the marble floors. A 12-foot Christmas tree dominated the main hall, decorated with ornaments that cost more than Flynn's monthly rent. Waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and canapes. Everything was designed to project generosity and success. Vivian moved through the crowd like a chess piece, strategic and controlled. She smiled at donors, posed for photographs, said all the right things in all the right moments. Inside, her mind raced through calculations and contingencies. Clinton had positioned himself near the main stage, his silver hair perfect, his smile practiced. In less than an hour, he would present the annual charity report and request her signature on the distribution documents, if she signed. The money would flow through his shell companies one final time, and when the federal investigation began, her name would be on every incriminating paper. Her phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. "They're moving faster. Clinton has people watching you. Be careful who you trust tonight." Vivian's eyes swept the room. Security guards she did not recognize stood at several exits. The head of IT, a man Clinton had personally hired, was monitoring something on his tablet with unusual intensity. Even her father seemed distant, manipulated by whispers she could not counter. She needed someone outside the system, someone with no connection to Clinton's network, someone who had nothing to gain and nothing to lose. Then she remembered the gatekeeper in the garage, the calm voice guiding her through panic, the military bearing half hidden beneath a security uniform, the way he had looked at her, not with greed or worship, but with simple human recognition, and the child who had given away her scarf without expecting anything in return. 30 minutes before Clinton's presentation, the fire alarm screamed through Sterling Tower. Emergency lights flashed crimson. Automated announcements directed everyone toward the evacuation routes. Guests began moving toward the exits, their champagne forgotten, their jewelry catching the strobing lights. Flynn saw it immediately on his security monitors. The alarm had triggered from a manual pull station in a maintenance corridor, not from any actual fire detection system. Someone had done this deliberately. More concerning, the evacuation routing on his screen had been altered. It was directing people away from the main cameras, through corridors that would be difficult to monitor. He grabbed his radio to alert the security supervisor, but static filled the channel. Someone was jamming communications. Flynn made a decision. He left his booth and began moving through the building, not following the altered routes but using the maintenance paths he had memorized during months of quiet patrols. If something was happening, he needed to understand it before he could stop it. He found Vivian on the 20th floor, alone in a stairwell. She was not moving toward the exits. Instead, she was standing very still, her phone in her hand, her face ghostly in the emergency lighting. When she saw Flynn, something shifted in her expression. Relief battling with suspicion. "The evacuation routing has been tampered with," Flynn said. "Communications are jammed. What's happening here tonight?" Vivian studied him for a long moment. Behind her careful mask, he could see exhaustion, fear, and the desperate hope of someone running out of options. "I need to know I can trust you." "Your daughter gave me her scarf 2 hours ago because she thought I looked cold. I still have it in my pocket. If that doesn't tell you who I am, nothing will." Something in Vivian's defenses cracked. "There's a man named Clinton Waverly. He's been stealing from our charity fund for years, and tonight he's planning to frame me for everything. I have evidence, but no way to present it safely. Every system in this building is compromised." Flynn processed the information rapidly, his training clicking into place. The security booth on Sublevel 3 has a hardline connection that bypasses the main network. Old infrastructure, never updated because it was deemed unnecessary. If your evidence is digital, I can access the original server logs from there. "How do you know that?" "Because before I was a gatekeeper, I spent 8 years in Air Force security operations. I know systems, and I know when they've been tampered with. Someone's been adjusting camera timestamps and network logs for weeks. I noticed it but couldn't prove why. Now I understand." Vivian made her decision. "Show me." They moved together through the building's hidden arteries, Flynn leading, Vivian following. The security booth was exactly where Flynn remembered, a forgotten room filled with aging equipment that still connected to the tower's original backbone. While Flynn worked at the console, pulling up archived transaction logs that had not been erased, Vivian watched with growing amazement. "These are the original records," Flynn said, pointing at the screen. "Before they were altered. Look at the routing numbers. These shell companies all trace back to accounts that Clinton personally controls. He's been using the charity as a laundry for 2 years. Can you copy this, all of it?" "Already done." Flynn held up a flash drive. "But evidence isn't enough. If Clinton has the building locked down and communications jammed, he controls the narrative. You need to present this somewhere he can't suppress it." Vivian thought about the gala, the cameras, the guests, the reporters covering the event for tomorrow's news. The presentation. He's expecting me on stage in 15 minutes to sign the distribution documents. What if I don't sign? What if I show this instead? He'll try to stop you. He has security people throughout the building. Then I need someone beside me who he doesn't control. She looked at Flynn, seeing him fully for perhaps the first time. Will you help me? Flynn thought about Audrey waiting at Mrs. Patterson's apartment, about the plastic bracelet on his wrist, about all the reasons he should stay invisible and safe. Then he thought about Sarah, about how she had always believed that people were meant to help each other, about how she would never have walked away from someone in genuine need. Let's go expose a thief. They returned to the 40th floor as the false alarm ended and guests filtered back toward the main hall. Clinton was already on stage, microphone in hand, delivering a speech about generosity and community spirit. Vivian's father stood in the front row, nodding along, completely unaware of the betrayal unfolding around him. And now, Clinton announced with practiced warmth, I'd like to invite our CEO, Vivian Sterling, to the stage to present our annual distribution report and approve the allocation of funds to our partner organizations. Applause filled the room. Vivian walked toward the stage, her red dress catching the light, her expression unreadable. Flynn moved along the wall, positioning himself near the technical booth where the presentation screens were controlled. Clinton's smile faltered almost imperceptibly when he saw the flash drive in Vivian's hand. Vivian, the documents are already prepared. You just need to sign. Actually, Vivian said, her voice carrying through the microphone, I think the guests deserve to see exactly where their generous donations have been going. She handed the flash drive to the technician. Clinton stepped forward, his mask slipping. This is highly irregular. Security, please escort Ms. Sterling. You mean the security team you personally hired last month? Flynn's voice cut through the tension. He had moved to the stage, positioning himself between Clinton's men and Vivian. The ones whose employment records show payments from companies that don't actually exist. Clinton's face contorted. Who are you? You're just a gatekeeper. You have no authority here. He's with me. Vivian's voice was steady now, carrying a certainty she had not felt in years. And he has more authority in this room than anyone who's been helping you steal from children. The screens flickered. Transaction records appeared. Shell company names, routing numbers, dates, and amounts. The evidence told its story clearly. Money flowing from the charity fund through a labyrinth of entities that all led back to Clinton Waverly. Gasps echoed through the hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters who had expected a routine puff piece suddenly recognized the story of their careers. This is fabricated, Clinton shouted. She's trying to cover her own crimes. Actually, sir, I can confirm the authenticity of these records. A young man stepped forward from the crowd, the same nervous accountant who had delivered the audit report to Vivian hours earlier. I'm a licensed forensic accountant. I've examined the server logs. These files are unaltered originals, unlike the versions Mr. Waverly submitted for official review. Clinton looked wildly around the room, searching for allies. His security men were backing away, unwilling to be associated with a sinking ship. Even the IT director he had hired was quietly edging toward an exit. Then Wilfred Sterling stepped onto the stage. His face held the particular devastation of a man realizing he had trusted a monster while doubting his own child. He walked past Clinton without acknowledgement and stopped in front of Vivian. I didn't listen, he said quietly, his voice thick. I should have listened. You can listen now, Vivian replied. That's what matters. Wilfred turned to Clinton, and his expression hardened into something ancient and merciless. Security, not his security. Building security. Please escort Mr. Waverly to the lobby. The police have been notified and will take custody. As Clinton was led away, shouting protests that no one believed, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters demanded statements. Guests whispered urgently into phones. Photographers captured every moment of the downfall. Through it all, Flynn stood quietly at the edge of the stage, ready to fade back into the shadows he had inhabited for so long. But then Vivian's hand caught his arm. "Stay," she said. "Please." The questions came in waves. Who was this man? How had he helped uncover the fraud? What was his connection to the CEO? Vivian looked at Flynn, at the security uniform that marked him as invisible to most of the people in this room, at the plastic bracelet on his wrist that his daughter had given him for protection. She thought about the scarf in her pocket, the calm voice in the garage, the expertise he had hidden beneath humility. "This is Flynn Merrick," she told the cameras. "He's the reason justice happened tonight. He's a veteran, a father, and the most capable person I've ever met, and as of this moment, he's also my fiancé." The word landed like a thunderclap. Flynn turned to her, shock plain on his face. The reporters went wild. Camera flashes exploded like stars. Vivian leaned close to whisper in his ear, "Trust me, I'll explain everything. But right now, this is the only way to protect you from the fallout. They can't discredit you if you're family." Flynn understood, in the world of power and politics, a gatekeeper who exposed corruption was a target, but a fiancé of the CEO was untouchable, at least long enough for the truth to become undeniable. He looked at her, at the fear and hope and determination in her eyes, and he made a choice. "Whatever you need," he said quietly. "We'll figure out the rest later." For the cameras, they smiled. For the questions, they gave carefully worded answers. And when the evening finally ended, when the police had completed their initial investigation and the reporters had exhausted their questions, they stood together in the empty lobby of Sterling Tower, unsure of what came next. "I'm sorry," Vivian said. "I didn't plan that, it just happened. You saved my job and probably my life. Clinton's people would have found a way to destroy me if I'd just been some gatekeeper who got in the way." "So what do we do now?" Flynn thought about Audrey, about breakfast promises and piano lessons, about the fragile life he had built from the wreckage of loss. "Now I go home to my daughter. Tomorrow, we figure out how to handle the media. And eventually, when the dust settles, we have an honest conversation about what this actually means." Vivian nodded. "I'd like that. The honest conversation, I mean." 3 days later. Vivian stood outside Flynn's apartment building. It was nothing like Sterling Tower, a modest complex with peeling paint and windows that rattled in the wind. She felt absurdly out of place in her designer coat, clutching a gift-wrapped package that contained art supplies for a child she had met only briefly. Flynn opened the door, and behind him, Audrey peered out with unconcealed curiosity. "You're the lady from the parking garage Daddy said you were important." "Your daddy saved my company," Vivian said. "That makes him pretty important too." Audrey considered this, then grabbed Vivian's hand and pulled her inside. "Come see our Christmas tree. It's small, but Daddy says love doesn't need a big tree to grow." The apartment was exactly as Flynn had described it, modest and warm and filled with evidence of a father's devotion. Photographs of Audrey lined the walls. A repaired doll sat proudly on a small bookshelf. The tiny Christmas tree glowed with cheap lights that somehow seemed more magical than any chandelier. Vivian handed Audrey the gift. "This is a thank you for lending me your scarf. It kept me very warm when I needed it most." Audrey tore off the wrapping to reveal a professional art set, the kind with dozens of colors and different types of brushes. Her eyes went wide. "Can I draw you, both of you, together?" "I'd be honored," Vivian said. So they sat together in the small living room, Flynn and Vivian side by side on the worn couch, while Audrey worked with intense concentration on her masterpiece. Outside, snow fell softly against the windows. Inside, something that felt like family began to take shape. "That engagement announcement," Vivian said quietly. It was desperate and unfair, and I should have asked you first. It was also brilliant, and probably saved both our reputations. So what do we do about it? We can't actually get married just because I panicked on a stage. Flynn was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter add details to her drawing. Maybe we don't have to decide right now. Maybe we could just spend some time getting to know each other, without the cameras, without the crisis, just two people who might have more in common than they expected. Vivian felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. I'd like that. Audrey looked up from her drawing. Are you going to be my new mommy? The question hung in the air, innocent and impossibly complex. Flynn started to redirect, to give one of the careful answers adults use when children ask things that cannot be simply explained. But Vivian spoke first. I don't know yet, sweetheart. But I do know I'd like to be your friend. Is that okay for now? Audrey thought about it seriously, the way children do when they sense that honesty matters. That's okay. Friends are good, and maybe someday you can teach me about the big tower. Daddy says you're the boss of the whole building. I am, and someday, if you'd like, I'll show you the view from the very top. Can Daddy come too? Absolutely. Audrey smiled, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her artwork. Vivian looked at Flynn, at the warmth in his eyes, at the plastic bracelet still on his wrist. She thought about all the expectations she had carried, all the armor she had worn, all the lonely years at the top of a tower that had never felt like home. Christmas isn't over yet, Flynn said. Mrs. Patterson made cookies. Would you like to stay for dinner? Vivian Sterling, CEO of a billion-dollar company, looked around the tiny apartment with its cheap decorations and its overwhelming love, and she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. I would like that very much. Months passed. The scandal faded from headlines, replaced by new dramas and fresh outrages. Clinton Waverly awaited trial in a minimum security facility, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. The Sterling Christmas Charity Fund had been restructured with complete transparency, and donations had actually increased as people responded to the story of corruption exposed and justice served. Flynn accepted a position as Director of Security Operations for Sterling Industries, a role that used his actual skills while allowing him to be home for dinner with Audrey every night. He still wore the plastic bracelet sometimes, though it was faded now, the stars barely visible. It reminded him of the night everything changed. Vivian found herself visiting the modest apartment more and more often. She helped Audrey with homework. She learned to make hot chocolate the way Flynn's wife used to make it, from an old recipe card that Audrey treasured. She discovered that she laughed more easily than she had thought possible, that she could cry without feeling weak, that love did not require a big tower to grow. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the gala that had exposed Clinton's crimes, Vivian returned to the security booth where Flynn had pulled the evidence that saved her company. The building was quiet. Most employees home with their families. Only essential personnel remained, including the new Director of Security Operations, who had insisted on working the holiday shift because someone had to, and he remembered what it meant to keep promises. You didn't have to come here, Flynn said when he saw her. I know. Vivian was wearing a red dress again, simpler than the one from last year, but just as striking. I wanted to. She set a wrapped gift on his desk. Inside was a framed drawing, Audrey's artwork from that first visit, showing 3 figures holding hands beneath a Christmas tree. At the top, in careful child's handwriting, were the words, Our Family. She made a new version, Vivian said. An updated one. She wanted you to have this original. Flynn looked at the drawing, at the 3 figures that had somehow become real, at the family that had assembled itself from wreckage and hope. I have something for you too. He pulled a small box from his desk drawer. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, with a stone the color of winter sky. Last year, you proposed to me in front of 100 cameras because you needed a partner to survive a crisis. Tonight, there are no cameras, no crisis, just us. He took a breath. Vivian Sterling, will you marry me? Not for protection or reputation. Just because I love you, and Audrey loves you, and you make both of us believe in things we thought we'd lost. Vivian felt tears on her face, warm against the cold. She had spent her whole life building walls, climbing towers, proving that she did not need anyone. And here, in a forgotten security booth on Christmas Eve, she finally understood that strength was not about standing alone. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Flynn slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there, outside. Snow fell softly over Sterling Tower, somewhere in the city. Audrey was waiting with Mrs. Patterson, probably bouncing with impatience, ready to celebrate with the family that had grown from tragedy into something beautiful. Tomorrow there would be gifts and laughter and hot chocolate made from an old recipe card. There would be a lifetime of tomorrows, ordinary and extraordinary, built on a foundation of courage and kindness. But for now, in the quiet of the security booth where justice had begun, Flynn and Vivian held each other and watched the snow transform the world into something new. A gatekeeper and a CEO, a widower and an heiress. Two broken people who had found in each other the strength to become whole. And that was the greatest Christmas miracle of all.